Welcome to the scheduled Board of Selectmen meeting for September 16th, 2013. I say scheduled because, as you can see by a quick head count, we do not have a quorum tonight. But we do want to open the meeting and have a discussion. This is a follow-up meeting from the last Selectmen's meeting, in that we were discussing a change or change to the Personnel Board based on DOR recommendations. And as a follow-up to the Selectmen's meeting, we wanted to have a meeting that included FinCom, existing board members, and our town moderator to discuss and get input on the pros and cons of making a change. So we can certainly do that. There'll be, I guess, no deliberation, no voting, but there will be information sharing. And it'll give people a chance who came here tonight to share their opinions and thoughts and on the process. Gary, anything else to add on that? I guess I'm not officially chairing anyway, but.
No, I don't know. Perhaps we want the members are here to introduce themselves so that if anyone's listening, they perhaps know who's here.
Absolutely,
As,
absolutely. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So let's see how quick the camera turns. And actually, yeah, why don't maybe we could just come right around the table. That's a good idea. Make it easier.
You first. Am I invited to the table? I was
Sure.
more
Absolutely.
an observer than I'll certainly come up.
Why not?
I've sat up here before. I can do it again.
Yeah, new FinCom guys always sit up here.
Nah, we'll sit here.
So maybe we could just do quick around the table. Mostly very familiar faces to the Georgetown public, but Chris, maybe we just start with you and just go around with quick intros.
Oh, I'm sorry. Christopher Rich, I'm the present chair of the Personnel Board.
Beverly Enos, moderator.
Michael Hinchliff, new member of FinCom.
Jim Lacey, FinCom.
Don Cudmore, Police Chief.
Great. So I will open up to Gary. Maybe if you could kind of summarize a little bit about the discussion last meeting and the motivation for this meeting, and as a starting point.
I think we got here because we were working on the warrant and somebody had moved this forward to discuss for the warrant. And there was some discussion as to the fact that we didn't have a working personnel board at the moment. And I sort of remembered, my memory got jogged as to, I believe we as a board did not make appointments because we did want to discuss what the DOR had recommended, that perhaps a change. And so we did not make any appointments, and so I felt that it was somewhat late on us why we don't have a working personnel board at the moment. And we, at that meeting where we were going to appoint them, had asked, I believe, if my memory is correct, to have this meeting that we're having now. And so I'd say that goes back to May.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is sort of a special meeting because we felt with the warrant coming up, needing closing next week, I felt that it was necessary to get moving as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And so I guess going back to the May meeting is why we're here tonight.
Great, great. And I do, and that, as part of previous meetings, we didn't want just a change to happen and a phone calls to be made and say, hey, guess what just happened? We did want to have the discussion, so I'm glad people were able to come out tonight. Because as usual, timelines get compressed, but again, I appreciate everybody adjusting their schedule and being here. And I guess the two-part thing we're discussing is there was a recommendation from the DOR, among many recommendations, and one regarding the Personnel Board, and there was a draft bylaw amendment put forward to bring to the warrant, correct?
That's right.
And so really we're discussing the pros and cons. Well, you can either talk about the pros and cons of the DOR recommendation. And I think we made it clear too that we really are taking them as recommendations, not gospel, in terms of all the things that they proposed. Certainly some good ideas and then some maybe not. And or any comments on the proposed bylaw. So really discussion format, sharing information. Again, there won't be any decisions tonight per se, but we want to gather information, get people a chance to share it, and then it'll be on the agenda for our meeting next Monday night.
Could
So,
I
sure.
ask a question? Have we shared with any of the other members of committees and boards here the changes that are in front of us? Is anybody aware of any?
And we
Okay.
have,
I have the redlined, Janet was kind enough to send out the redlined existing bylaw. My computer would not print out the DOR report. I think it's just page 10
it's relatively, yeah,
through
it's,
12.
right.
That affects, I have that.
Oh, thank you so much.
But it was all attached to the email that Janet sent out.
And I do want to say, and I'll open it up after this, is that,
This is from the DOR, their recommendation.
thank you, Janet. The discussion doesn't necessarily end tonight, you know, everyone, of course, because it's a public meeting, but I'm just sending the invitation and open welcome to have continue the discussion next week with all the selectmen as part of this process. So this is definitely not a once and done tonight and never heard from again, but this is definitely a starting point, or a middle point maybe. So with that, I'll open it up to people who want to make comments, discussions, concerns, support.
Well, while everybody's looking it over, if I may, Mr.
Sure,
Chairman.
sure.
So I was here at the last meeting,
Mhm.
and I did voice my opinion, and I was hoping that the circumstances would allow the sharing of information being a little bit more candid and not have a problem discussing personnel, individuals in open public. I made a comment that I thought our town administrator was overworked. He wears a number of hats. He's the HR officer. He is the finance manager of the town. He handles the day-to-day operations of the town. He doesn't have enough time now to do all of that work. And to give him all of this responsibility personnel-wise, I think it's an unfair burden upon him, and I think it's being set up so it doesn't get done. As it is now, the Personnel Board, when we sat at that time, it was the fullest the board had been, with a quorum of the board. We sat down and Mr. Farrell made himself more than available to us. We worked on we rewrote the personnel manual. We worked on all the job descriptions that, when there's a new job to be posted, it came before us for review. And as expeditiously as possible, we got it out. But the big thing is, we also worked on the wage and salary classification, and the forms for annual reviews for all town employees. Now, that was left in the administrator's hands as the HR director. And correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, the man has no time to do it. He's got a new school that's being built in town. He's got all kinds of other issues and problems. He doesn't have the time to address it fully. At the last meeting, one of his primary concerns was because he wanted to have a centralization of personnel records. Well, there's no reason that can't be done, and I'm going to put a caveat in there because I think I'm going to side with the chief. I think law enforcement personnel or public safety personnel files, I think they may fall into a different category than being kept in, depending on what the security is on the central personnel file. That was what Mr. Farrell had addressed as one of his biggest issues. Now, I'm the sitting chair, and I've been sitting as the chair for, I think, the last 3 years. DOR made 3 appointments with me to interview me. And the first was canceled, the second was postponed, the third was canceled. They never spoke to me, except on the phone. And for them to come
So
up,
you did connect on the phone though? Just to,
we spoke briefly. Hi, how are you? What do you do? When was the last time you met?
okay.
What have you done? How do you set up your meetings? And the personnel board, our meetings are set up as needed. An issue comes in, the members are contacted, either by me or we had a clerk, was Deb Rogers. Deb would find out who was available when. It was very easy with me. I'm available whenever. We'd set up a meeting. If we had to advertise it, we'd sit with Michael as to how it had to be advertised. We were, by statute, if we had to advertise in the paper that we were going to change it. We would work out a system on how to notify all of the town's employees, and we would go forward with it. I think you're building, the way I read the bylaw, and blame it on the lawyer in me, you're setting it up for an inherent conflict of interest. The purpose of the bylaw was to establish a fair and equitable personnel policies and the administration based on merit principles. Now, if you're going to hire someone and then their only appeal of discipline is to you, the hiring person, by definition, that's a conflict. That's not independent. I think every employee in the town who is not covered by a collective bargaining agreement is then placed in jeopardy personnel-wise. In that respect. And I think the town is also placed in jeopardy because they don't have an independent appeal. The only appeal is to Superior Court. That's going to be costly. Plus, you're going to add more of a administrative burden on the administrator's office, Janet and Michael. I can't see either of them doing it without another body to handle the papers and to set up what I was interpreting from what Michael had to say at the last meeting, to set up the practices and procedures to have the secure personnel files. That's going to be expensive. And right now you have a volunteer board that's not costing the town anything. And I took exception at the last meeting when it was stated that we had an inactive board. I recruited people for appointment, got 2 to agree, and sent their names in. Then advised them that they had to send their names in, which they did, and their letters. And no appointments were made. You can't operate a board with one person. Although many people in town think I have multiple personalities. I have a sense of humor.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of?
Can I,
Okay.
Chris
Good.
said some things regarding my position, and I'd like to talk about it. First of all, I am doing all these things now. I have the responsibility, but not the authority to carry them out.
Okay.
I spend a large part of my day, not every single day, but a large part of my position is keeping the town out of trouble when it comes to personnel issues. They come up all the time. And so that's a big part of my job, and I do it. I'm doing it now. The proposed personnel policy would give me authority to carry out the responsibilities, which I don't have right now. And as far as doing a classification plan, I did do one. I asked the board if they wanted me to do it. That was shortly after I arrived here. Actually, I completed it in 2010, almost 3 years ago. And that's when I presented it to the board, personnel board. I used to do that prior to coming here. I was a consultant for 5 years, and that was one of my main functions. I'd go to different towns and do classification studies and make proposals for change. So I was very experienced at it, and I presented one to the board, and with job descriptions for every non-union position, and
Michael,
classification, and they never got adopted.
we never got job descriptions for every position in town.
Every non-union position.
I checked all my electronic files. I don't have any record of it.
Well, we did review them, Mike, at the department head meeting too. I have the package that you'd given out back in 2010.
Yeah.
Which was prompted by us to notify Mike's office concerning the classification of employees. The police department is the largest townside department, so myself at the time as a lieutenant and the chief took a vested interest in the updates of the personnel handbook, because we have 6 different types of classification of employees at the PD. And the sworn personnel, pursuant to the personnel record, and I did watch the meeting last week about pulling records from someone's dead cold hands. I hope it wasn't mine, but I heard that statement, and it said police chief, so I don't know, but you're absolutely right, because what I did tonight is I brought an example of the personnel record. This is my personnel record. And
That's your SOP, standard operating procedures for personnels.
no, this is my personnel record. This is all of the records that pertain to Don Cudmore in the police department. Training.
Okay.
So I have 34 of these binders, and my employees run from non-sworn part-time personnel to full-time sworn personnel and non-sworn personnel, civilian dispatchers. So I have to there's a locked cabinet in my office, and these books are updated daily. Training memos, attorneys request training memos, we have to provide them, and other personnel matters. So when we talk about a centralization of personnel records, I have to get access to these 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. These are constantly being dealt with. And it's just a challenge when I heard this whole situation was unfolding. And I've been following right along with regard to the personnel handbook, specifically memos I sent to your board dating back as far as May 2010, that there are some issues.
We discussed that at length, and I think that's why there's a public safety exception in the manual.
In this manual here.
Yeah.
And I can't find one. And we've run into a couple of problems with the manual, and I concur with Mike that it is his full-time job. I'm in his office daily, if not weekly, concerning not serious personnel matters, but questions concerning personnel so that we do it right. And then probably the biggest problem that we attempted to fix together was the fact of a timeline pursuant to problem resolution. If you look at the manual of 2003, the original, to the update to 2010, the timelines are missing in section 8. So it puts us in a bit of an adverse position if we do have a personnel issue. And these employee classifications complicate it. However, Mike's salary wage study actually corrected. So if their appendixes from here could be made into here, But I think Mike's right, the logjam is trying to act on that authority.
Well,
I think that's the problem that we
So
have.
one thing, Chris, I think the key is we need to think that it's like 2025. Because we can't really look at people's individual capabilities now. We're really, my question is, as a board member, is functionally, organizational functionality.
That's right,
Mhm.
yes.
The role of the town administrator having these responsibilities versus a personnel board having these responsibilities. I mean, that's really what we're, and so, I mean, there's, in what's done, what hasn't been done, I think are indicators as to, they're clues as to what's needed, what's not needed. But I just want to put out there that, and I think we're heading that direction, but just to be clear, we're looking at government structure, really, right?
Right.
And what makes sense.
Going
And so,
forward with government structure.
and so I guess just a quick follow-up, Mike, to what you said as a question then is it reasonable, say for the next town administrator, to have this HR responsibility and authority? Or do you think it's something specific to your skill set that makes it so you can handle it? And I know you can't predict who we're gonna hire
Yeah.
type of thing, but just a expected
I'd say
capabilities.
the latter. Only because, well, traditionally,
Just to clarify, what was the latter?
my
His skill
specific skill sets.
Okay.
Traditionally, most towns, you'll find the HR function in the finance department,
Okay.
because they deal with all the benefits, and HR would be part of the finance. And frankly, that's how it used to be here. The finance director had the HR job, but when they split it off, they gave the town administrator the HR. They took it away from the finance director, but then we came full circle and gave the finance director's job to the town administrator. So it was split momentarily in time, but it's all come back together again. Ideally, yeah, I don't think we're big enough for our own HR director. And right now, the clerical duties are being split between the treasurer's office and the administrative assistant in the selectman's office. And ideally, we need to combine that, because we have multiple sets of personnel files. And that's not the way it should be.
Then there's a
Chris?
medical exemption too, which is important because inside these confidential personnel records are medical components that need to be stored separately, housed differently than a regular personnel file in the event because of obvious.
Which we do.
Which we do.
We don't.
I have to do the same thing.
We have payroll in the treasurer's office, and because they handle the part of the medical, they have a separate medical file. But Janet handles the workers' comp, which is considered a medical issue too.
And I think too, Mike can attest to it, as can Janet and the treasurer's office. Although it sounds confusing, we all do work very well together with regard to the personnel filing system. It is a bit scattered because of the various responsibilities everyone has, but I want to ensure the public and ensure the board that we absolutely, and I know even working with the personnel board at times, although it sounds confusing, it is orderly with everybody's specific tasks driven to keep the personnel file on board.
And I think if I might say, yes, the issue of multiple personnel files, that's not a function of the personnel board. We don't manage personnel files. He's the HR director. He sets up those procedures. He has that authority. I don't know what authority Michael's talking about that he needs to enforce it. You know, annual reviews, what authority does he need? He's the town administrator. I need an annual review. It's up to you guys to give him the authority to enforce it. It's not the personnel board's fault. You know, we're the people who adjudicate the policy. With all due respect to the chief, if there was a problem with that, if the board were notified that, these laws aren't etched in granite, or these bylaws, well, the bylaws, not the bylaws, but the rules and regs aren't etched in granite. They could be amended at any time.
Absolutely.
If we forgot to put something in, and I really thought there was a public safety exception, I think in the original draft it was, then the then town administrator looked it over and it got, and I think Michael will agree, when we reviewed it, there were things in there that constitutional issues came up. Things disappeared. You know, if we missed something, you know, all of that can be amended, but we're not the day-to-day administrators of the personnel.
So can I ask, just as a point of history, when was the Personnel Board created and why was it created?
1974, I believe.
74.
May 4th, 1974, at the annual town meeting, Article 28. And it was established for the purpose to establish fair and equitable personnel policies, and I believe in a system of personnel administration based on merit principles that ensures uniform, efficient application of those policies.
Did we have the town administrator position back then?
No, we didn't, and that's, I think, the reason that board was created is because we didn't have a town administrator. We essentially had a person that was like Janet. She was the
You had a
secretary to the
superstar.
board, the secretary to the
The
board.
Board of Selectmen ran it, you had a secretary of the board.
You had a secretary of the board. You know, if I may speak, I think I'm speaking on behalf of the finance committee. I think we've always believed that the professional side of town administration has to be strengthened. It really isn't strong enough right now. And I think historically, even though I can't dispute the fact that there are people on the personnel board now, historically, there have not been. It's been hard to get people on that board. In fact, it's hard to get people on all of the boards. And I think what the DOR has to say about town government, thinking about it strategically, is absolutely true. It's way too diverse. There are just too many boards and committees. It really has to be consolidated. And one of the things they said was, it's amazing it works, and the only reason it works is because everyone gets along well enough to make it work. That's not a good long-term strategy, I think, for the structure of the town. We really have to strengthen, I think, the professional side of government and bring as much as possible back under that. You know, how it happens is obviously something that has to be discussed. You know, there may be things that people bring up about that, but it's to my way of thinking, and I think some of the members of the FinCom share that, it's definitely to strengthen the professional administration side.
Well, I think just one example, when I was working with Mike, we were looking at the hourly wage of our reserve officers and why we were having difficulty with retention. And our hourly wage is very low in comparison to the other areas with our reserve officers. And to be able to just change that hourly wage, even with the money appropriately budgeted, you have to go before the personnel committee, you have to, you know, there's a number of hoops to jump through to make that happen versus being able to go to a strong town administrator and say, look, this is our reasoning for it, this is how we're going to budget it, and it will reduce our need to continually hire people. And I've been working since 2009 to get that done, and we just can't seem to get over those type of hurdles because of the authority issue.
Mr. Chairman, strong town administrator like town manager?
I believe they are different. There's a big difference, I believe,
spelled
between strong.
They are
The strong
The
town
town-
versus the town, strong town administrator is more at the direct reports, and I believe town manager then takes the authority to a different level, even sometimes usurping some of what the selectmen
With the
typically
selectmen,
vote
I
on.
think that's true. The
Right.
town manager is a
That's
very
an
different
unofficial
position.
take on it. So I think one of the discussions that ties into this is, if you look at the DOR concept is going to a stronger position where there's more direct accountability. Which I look at this as from an outsider of working in the free market like most of us, and I shake my head, and the reporting process the hiring and I'm amazed it works. And I think that this is part of and I guess it's in essence, it's a bigger issue that's starting with this discussion today on accountability for the town administrator and how we're structured. But I do shake my head sometimes and because I get to sit in Mike's office now once a week and we talk about stuff and I'll just be like, really? Just the process sometimes, and not specific to this, just what he and the team have to go through sometimes as an overall government issue, not specific to the personnel board. So,
Well,
okay.
as you know, this is not the only board that I sit on in town.
Yes, I know.
And I spend a lot of time in Michael's office. Where's he get? If we're all in his office, how does he work?
He eats lunch at his desk.
After 4 o'clock.
I appreciate the chief's comments about how many hoops. There's a reason why you have all these hoops. It's called checks and balances. There's a reason. There's a reason why we always had a FinCom representative sitting with us on the board. When Robin was sitting there on the board, instant info on what she thought the FinCom would feel, or how they'd feel. And when we had the board sitting, I don't think there was any abnormal delays. If you needed something right away, I don't remember you ever coming to us for anything that you needed right away. But there was one thing that Michael brought to us that we needed right away, and I think it was a posting, or something like that. And it happened a meeting was scheduled and it got done. It's a matter of checks and balances. Again, you want to keep the town out of trouble? If he had all of this responsibility, his next appeal is to the personnel board. You have a case in court right now on a personnel issue that I fully expect the judge to say you have not exhausted all of your administrative remedies, and for it to come back here for a decision.
Okay.
And I think we're on the same page on that one.
Well, that posting, if I'm thinking back,
It
had
was
to do
something-
with the cable group.
Yeah, that you wanted.
But that's not under my domain.
I
They,
understand that, but you wanted it done.
so I
you-
told them
you
they
felt
had
that
to
they-
go to see you guys.
Right, you felt it was a circumstance that had some exigency to it, and we reacted right away to it. It didn't get delayed. And there were some things that were brought up about what was going to be posted by members of the board that were not thought about by the people in the, in CATV commission.
But a posting is a very ministerial action and shouldn't even have to go to the board.
If you asked me in the scheme of things, if I thought a posting had to come to the personnel board, I'd say no. It should only have to pass muster with you, the HR director. If you asked me if I thought an appeal to a disciplinary process should go before you, I'd say you're setting yourself up for a colossal lawsuit.
And let me
Well,
just
I
jump
think-
in 1 second.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We now have a quorum present, so just wanted to officially open the selectmen's meeting at 6:45. You guys are going. 6:45
My apologies,
p.m.
Mr. Chairman, for running late
I'm glad
tonight.
you're here.
Mr. Chairman, with regard to the process, and certainly I understand about checks and balances concerning town government, my example was to show that in 2010, when we adopted the new regulations, Appendix A and B were still being worked on. They're still not completed today. That was 3 years ago. Those are the roadblocks for us to try and ensure that we are able to fix some of the smaller problems. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the authority that I think Mike is speaking of. Something as simple as an hourly wage adjustment that's been proven, there's been a survey taken, and the outlier is not necessarily can we afford it, it just needed to be done. And we're still looking at waiting for that today. And that was March 24th of 2010. So I'm not blaming the personnel board. I've worked well with the personnel board. I'm just saying that a check and balance is one thing, but, you know, a logjam is another with regard to trying to move the business forward, that's all.
And I do question the checks and balances thing, and it's the difference between private sector and public sector, but, you know, there's a whole bunch of people out there working for a boss that if there's an issue is dealt with by the boss, and then there's an HR person, but there's no board of checks and balances, and they don't get sued. You know, lawsuits do happen, of course, anywhere.
And our check and balance is town meeting. Mr. Fowle says it every year.
Right.
Put it on the town meeting floor, let the town decide, and that's where a majority of our financial checks and balances are in our legislative. So,
Right, and there is a appeal to the select board. So I guess, because I'm saying I don't necessarily see that, I see that in this case, but I do see that there's a big part of the world that doesn't function that way. They function direct reports, direct accountability, HR, and, you know, and you're accountable, and then, you know, there's legal appeals in any case, you know, if that happens. Sure,
Can I
Gary.
interject it, as I think as what you said, one of the questions I wrote down, and it was as Chris was talking, and that is sort of as to arbitration and where employees go. I believe right now, we're the arbitrator, the union. Are we for the town employees, or is that the personnel board if there's an issue?
The way I read it, it comes to the personnel board with a recommended, and we give our decision to the Board of Selectmen. And I'm sure that would hold an awful lot of weight in court, because we would sit literally and take evidence. As if it were before an arbitrator. Listen to both sides and come up with a fair and equitable. And if I may, Gary, go back to what the chief said. If there was a log jam back in 2010, in 3 years, how many times did someone try and contact the personnel board to get it unjammed?
I got a folder full. I mean, I'm not gonna give you a timeline.
To me?
tonight. To you? No, I work specifically with Deb Rogers, who did a wonderful job. And, but again, I think I'm not gonna focus on 2010.
No,
You
no,
talk
I'm
about
talking 2010 to 2013.
Section 8,
This is-
problem resolution, when we discuss remedies for employees, I mean, I have 17 employees who are not unionized employees who would certainly use the provisions of the employee handbook. Section 8 has no timeline as the old section did, which is critical in the rules and regulations and policy and procedures in the police department, so they conflict. That's a problem.
Okay.
So, kind of,
So just the
That
question
was
on
that-
arbitration though, Gary, so my question to you is,
Yeah,
if
I
if
mean,
we're the arbitration for the union agreements, why would there be any difference for us being the arbitrator for the non-union? And I'm asking the question, I'm saying, do you see a difference there? Because either way, you have a board listening to both sides, making a decision. And,
Well, I think in using examples, with MCAD, EEOC, specific timelines, if there was something brought to the board's attention for them to act upon under a particular timeline, if it just sits there with no timeline, Chris mentioned a specific case, I don't know which case he's talking about, but if a judge were to say, bring it back because you didn't follow the personnel handbook, what's the timeline? There's no timeline. I mean, the problem could have been in 2005.
and I think your goal is to follow a good HR process
Yeah.
that is fair to the employee but strict, documented. You know, we've seen some cases where the documentation wasn't there,
This is
and
the
something
problem
comes out of left
resolution
field,
section
and
right there.
you say, well, that's not fair. Those types of things. So I guess, you know, and it is very dependent upon the team that works in town hall. You know, the one line I always remember from the Selectmen's Handbook, that, you know, the paraphrase, it's all about the people who work here, stupid. You know, it's not, you know, you have to have quality people in town or you're in trouble. And we're lucky we do. And we have the volunteer boards who put a lot of time in and a lot of effort in, which is, you know, great on top of that. So, so again, that was kind of my question. So I just Gary, back to you in terms of, we've been through this recently. I mean, would you see it from your perspective as being the same thing whether it's union or non-union, where we would, if there was even arbitration necessarily, be in that position as a board.
I guess one thing that came to mind where Mike sort of works directly under us, would it be fair if we were the arbitrator, or would a separate board be better, is a question that comes to my mind.
And I guess the one thing, again, I know this is municipal government, so it's different sometimes.
And I should
Right.
say right now, too, it's town
Right.
administrator, because we probably don't want to stick to one person,
Right.
like focusing out Mike, because
But, so if you're an employee in a company and your boss follows the procedure and then, let's say, terminates you, you don't then say, well, I'd like arbitration. They'd say, you either can accept it or you can pursue legal means, right? That's kind of how the world works out there, to a certain degree. And so again, I'm not sure, even we're kind of introducing the concept of arbitration versus being a good quote-unquote boss, if we're the people in charge, and listening to both sides and trying to make a fair decision and make sure that the HR process was followed. So I'm just trying to put some counterpoint out there in terms of, so we don't, just not assuming the way things have to be.
if I may, that what I would go back to there, I sort of come from both worlds a little bit. I was
yeah,
15
yeah.
years in the union, I was a shop steward, and so I understand the union end of it very well. As to the town, I mean, we've got a bylaw here that was voted in by the town, and it, as Chris kept saying, it's specific. It's to give a system of fair, and well, Chris read it, we can read it, we've got it. So in your minds, is this sort of what, the town has voted in a bylaw to give the people an area to go. You're sort of saying, we are the area, so are we in conflict with the bylaw that
Well-
has been voted on by the town? And I think that's sort of what we're here for, is try to decide, do we want to change that?
Right, because ultimately, we're not, because the town would decide to change it. So we're not gonna change anything, the town would be.
Correct.
So I think we're looking at a 30-year-old bylaw that may still apply. I'm sure 30-year-old bylaws that are still good out there.
13 years old. It was
I-
last amended in 2000.
Amended in 2000, okay. Originated in 74.
Originated in 74,
So-
last amended in 2000.
But the question is, has our structure changed, has the world changed to the point where the town should relook at this and say, does that decision we made still make sense?
Agreed, and
That's-
one,
Right.
one thing I would answer that with is, if you look at the history of working with the Board of Selectmen and the town, as Mike, we started, I believe, Jim probably know, we started with a finance director. And then I believe we had
Actually,
and when we had several finance directors.
we had,
Um,
actually only had one finance director. Two, I'm sorry, we had two.
Okay,
Two,
we had
right.
Manzi, and we had.
And the guy before him.
Davis.
Before
Davis.
him, that's
who-
right.
Who was the guy?
Jim
before?
Davis.
Jim
Davis,
Davis.
that's, okay.
But before that, really, it was the finance committee that did all of that,
Okay.
for the most part.
But then where did we go after Manzi? Then we went to town administrator?
We that's right.
But
There
didn't
was
we,
no
for a while, We had
town,
both?
there was no town of our size that we could find in Massachusetts that had both. So some of them had finance directors and no town administrator, and a lot of them had a town administrator and no finance director. So at that time, we thought that having a town administrator was more important. So so
Well,
we
I-
don't have well, actually, theoretically, we do have a finance
guess-
director. It's Mike.
See, where I'm going
We
with
never
this
went back
is-
and changed that bylaw.
is we've also had a lot of confusion in the
Right.
way the town has run. So to say that we're looking out for something that is in 25 years down the road, we don't have that crystal ball either. We've made several changes as change goes along, I guess.
Right.
I think hopefully we've done well with what we've done, as the DOR report did say. So we don't know whether we're gonna have a town administrator in 10 years, or a strong town manager, or maybe there'll be a human resources guy here. I mean, we don't have those crystal balls either, but I do know that the town did, as we said, voted on this personal bylaw with an intent. And it looks to me, I'd say, a little stronger for the employee, perhaps, than what you're talking about in the business world. I mean, I also worked 17 years as a supervisor, and yeah, many times I had to say, I didn't have the power to say you're done, but I had the power to recommend it, but those are always union personnel, so.
Right. And just so you know, when I was talking way out in the future, I wasn't implying we had to make a decision now that's going to last that long. I was trying to get the people out of the equation and say we're looking at just positions. So it's people we don't even know that are going to be in these positions 10 or 15 years from now, maybe.
Well, that's-
You know, it's
that's-
bound to
that's-
change.
That's
I
all
mean,
I was trying to say
that's
is
an interesting point, Steve.
make it a structural issue in how we operate.
If you remember what was said about this, at least it's the way I interpreted what Mike said, that this would be good, unique to someone with his skill set. Not every person that's gonna occupy that chair.
Well, we would have to hire to a skill set though. So I mean, it is, we would limit our candidates in essence, but we would have to hire to that skill set. Just like we have to hire someone now who knows finance.
Or you structure the department to take care of it. I mean,
Right.
there are solutions to all of these problems as far as
Oh,
I'm concerned.
absolutely.
And, you know, even the whole personnel thing that you're talking about, I'm sure there are towns out there that don't have personnel boards that have a way to deal with it. So we just have to find out what's the best way to deal with it.
So just, I'm gonna ask I think it's a no, but is there any bias in the DOR parts that anybody's aware of that would want them to have this structure changed? Or do we think it's truly objective that they're looking at our town and other towns? Just asking the question, it's always a good question to ask, to talk about the source of the recommendation.
I get the feeling from actually talking to them, I did talk to them, and looking at that report, that we're a bit of an outlier in terms of the number of boards, given our size, the number of boards that we have, and the diversity in how this town is managed. And I think that's their motivation. They're looking at us and saying, we don't understand how you guys do that. That it's, you know, again, it only works because everyone gets along. That there should be a much better structure in place.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I don't know if Emily's getting, she has an appointment, and I don't know.
No,
if she's
it's fine. My only concern would be if someone had a problem, and that checks and balance, the person that's hiring and firing can't be the person that you take the appeal to.
Yeah,
I think that was the
again,
intent of the personnel board.
have a way to fix that.
Right, and that was the
That's all.
intent of the
Yeah.
personnel board.
Yeah,
So if
well-
you get rid of the personnel board, then what happens?
But you don't need the personnel board to
Could
fix it.
become us.
It could become
But then
you.
I wonder if that would put us a little bit in a conflict where the guy doing hire and firing works directly under us.
Right.
Well, that's the
But
way I.
again, that's the real world. That's how
Yeah.
people work for
Why that's
people and
such a
they get
problem.
fired.
Yeah.
That's like,
Agreed.
Well, you know,
everybody
that's
operates
the
that
real
way.
world,
It's
but
dealt
with
with
all
in
due
other
respect,
towns. Right.
the real world in government, you can't make,
I
you
did reference
can't
that
compare
before.
that.
There are
I've
some
been
things I
involved
agree.
in both,
Yeah.
and you really can't compare the real world.
I think we should always strive to push government towards the real world as best as it makes sense.
Good luck.
As best as it makes sense. One baby step at a time.
If I may,
Sure. Yeah.
I think we need, I think it's going where Jim was going. We need to find the correct answer. I don't know that includes doing away completely with the personnel board, but perhaps we do find a way to hear more from Mike as to a way that we think that we could perhaps get, as he says, a little more strength in him and a better working relationship. If he's brought stuff forward, okay, where have we failed? Perhaps we need to look at some of the failures. As Dawn has said, there's something that we failed to act on. Mike has said that he's brought stuff forward. It didn't get processed, let's say. I believe there is a problem with trying to find a town employee to sit on the board, as they feel a little bit of, I don't know if conflict is the correct word, it's probably a better word, but,
The HR director's a town employee, let him sit on it.
no. I believe you do not sit on the board, or are you just an
Ex
advisor?
officio.
Yeah, I'm just there in advisory capacity.
Okay.
I can't be appointed to a board that, as a voting member. I'm not a resident.
Okay.
Move. Jump in the hot water with the rest of us.
So just Just one quick thing is, so Stu, just to catch up, we started without an official meeting, just to share information with the public, since everybody was able to get here. And then with the goal that, at that point, Gary and I, and now you would bring information back to the board next week for deliberation, and everybody here is certainly welcome to talk again as well. I just wanted to get you up, that's where we're at, so.
Mr. Chairman, I had a very candid brief chat with Mr. Trapani. And something that he came up with was, well, maybe we should get the board working and review it again in a year. And I think you might want to give that some thought. Any issues, once we get a full complement appointed, any issues that have to be addressed, any amendments that need to be addressed, I'm available anytime. I came back from vacation for this meeting. You know, my priorities are set. I made a commitment to this board, and I made a commitment to the planning board, I made a commitment to the Board of Health. I don't miss meetings, or I try not to, unless I have a parent or somebody ill, or if I'm ill. You know, I just don't not show up. Don't travel anymore in business. I'm retired, so I'm around.
Right. And again, I think part of it too, that was going back to the board function. But I do want to reiterate something you said, is that based on my request to the select board, we have not appointed since this year, July 1st, for the new round of appointments. And I want to make it clear that any lack of quorum or otherwise was totally I wanted to talk this through first. So I wanted to reiterate that you
Makes
said
sense.
that. Well, I just want to point out that it wasn't a lack of people showing up or anything, that, as of this year, it was, hey, if we're going to discuss this, let's discuss it and make one cohesive
It
decision.
makes sense.
So I just
We're all
want to, everybody
volunteers.
knows that.
And I agree with Mr. Lacy's assessment that it's hard enough to get people on boards in town. Too bad we can't figure out an incentive for people to volunteer.
And I think, the flip side is, if we did make a change, I mean, technically, we could, if we found out we made a mistake on any of these changes we make, we can change back and say, oh, we made a mistake, everybody. And I'll take it beyond just this personnel board. That is a nice thing, is that ultimately we don't decide anything, right? The town does. And, I think we could certainly come back and say, we tried this, here's the problem, and either come up with a new solution or go back to an old one too. So, it doesn't have to be super long-term. It should be well thought out and not done capriciously, because it is a change.
I agree.
It should be presented clearly to the town, so they can understand if there's two sides or three sides, all sides, and make a decision intelligently. But we're not gonna etch it in stone, like any of the changes we do, and that everything is up for review by the town.
And I hope you understand that I'm here advocating what I think
Absolutely.
is right.
I'm glad you're here, because we didn't want to do this. I mean, you've
And I
been
appreciate
leading
the
the board.
invitation.
You've been leading the board. It'd be
I'm
unfair to-
volunteer. This just means I get a few more hours or a day or so more to me. And my future wife, who's sitting in the back.
She's like, put the board back, put the board back. Kidding.
Yeah, she might pay you all. No.
No, but it's and again, the volunteer system, and we can argue over government structure and delays, but no one could ever argue the appreciation we have for everybody who puts the time in here. And there are a lot of the same people on multiple boards on a regular basis. So I just, this is a structural discussion about how Georgetown changes or doesn't change based on our current needs as an organizational structure. Not really anything beyond that. It's not, it's interesting, this is the personnel board discussion, but it's not personal. It's really objective, as best we can.
I think it was Will Rogers said, if you put all your eggs in one basket, make sure you watch that basket.
That's right. Any other comments or questions?
No, I'd like to thank you guys for your interest and having this discussion. I think was great.
If I may, I've
Sure.
always got more questions. How are we now, I don't know whether to address this to Mike or Chris, but on the centralization in that of the records? I mean, because that was one of the things mentioned here.
See, that's not a board function.
Okay, so that falls,
That would be the HR director's function, at least as I see it.
Well, I'd have to order somebody would have to tell the department heads to give me all their records.
So right now, the department heads,
Some.
some department, that was one of my
I
questions
don't
earlier, is
know.
who is keeping that?
The problem is I don't
One
know what's out
department
there.
head here, and
And I'm sure the fire department has their own. And there is, I was just reading through this, there is a reference to public safety personnel records. I can't find it again here. So that's part of the reason why the police and fire have other records. I'm not sure that that's still legally correct, but training records and promotion records, that's not really considered part of a personnel file.
Obviously, financial records are a different file. I mean, we have to coordinate with the treasurer's office, so.
Okay.
I mean, I can easily let everybody, I'll
This,
put something out there of what makes up a personnel file. And if it's not in that list, the legal list, it shouldn't be there either.
and we have a responsibility, though, to make sure that those aren't accessed by
Regardless, well,
could be
here
accessed by
in
just anybody.
here in town hall, the records in Pam's office, in the treasurer's office, and the records that Janet takes care of, they're under lock and key. So no one gets in those without express approval of me.
During the application process is a query issue, dissemination of query, so, as we've talked about before.
And obviously, we don't include school personnel.
That's the one thing that's exempt from the personnel policies. But on the other hand, the water and the electric are supposed to be, but aren't.
So if I may, just one question, though, for, that perhaps help in the future is, if we could know who we're talking about, as you just mentioned, and how many employees, like, who's gonna fall under that structure here at Town Hall? I mean, I see that as the first ones that sort of come before us. Electric and water have an elected board, not the Board of Selectmen. So whether that sort of might exempt them from this, I don't know. I mean, that's what we're here asking these questions, so I guess that's a question that perhaps if we could get some answers to, is just as you said. They sort of don't answer to us, probably because they have separate electric commissioners and water commissioners. So, I guess how many personnel are we talking here at the town hall? Now, do they use you, electric or water? Have they been before you for?
no, but if that were, I mean, in a perfect world today,
Personnel board, I
the way
should
the
say.
personnel board would operate, if Michael needed a directive sent out, if he sent me a memo and he communicates with me all the time by email on other things, that we needed to we need a personnel board meeting for the issue of X, and the number of phone calls it takes to set it up for a day, set it up for a particular day, get the board together, discuss it. I mean, to say he wants all the personnel files from all of the departments, with all due respect, I don't think they should be in this individual departments. I totally agree with them. I'm shocked that they are. And again, having been involved in law enforcement, there are things in those personnel folders that should not be out of the chief's control. And again, if you had to get to him, how far is it from here to there? He's reachable 24/7. I'm sure someone else in the station, if you needed to get into a file immediately, if not sooner, could have access to that file, yet it would be secure in all respects in the police station. I mean, you get as far as the window, you know, nobody, public doesn't roam around in that building. Everything that I've heard, in a perfect world, if it was brought up to the personnel board, this regulation, this regulation conflicts. We need to sit and talk about it. Okay, let's set it up. Let's fix it. Anybody in town that knows me, I'm the type of guy, if it's broken, time to fix it. What's the best interest of the town? Let's do it. Not sit and think about it. Listen to it, analyze it, react, write it, do it. That's the way the board operated. Look how fast we got the manual done when we had 4 members of the board. And the board prior to that worked on it for 4 years and didn't get it done. We went through it, and then the copy got disassembled that we had put together. And was it a rush to put it back together in its original form? Yes. Could we have missed a few things? Of course, we're human. If they need to be put back in there, the technology is there, the system is there now. Is it costing the town any money? Not a dime. As a matter of fact, it's making the town money, because he's got that time that it would take him to do it available. He needs more teeth, and if he needs the teeth through the personnel board, give the personnel board the authority to issue directives to the HR director, and have the HR director follow through with it.
Well, I mean, that does create just another board layer in the process, right? Because right now, we have the ability to give that directive. So, I mean,
No,
it's just, I'm just
I
saying, it just
understand,
creates
but
another cog in
rather
the
than
wheel in
him-
the system.
I mean, you can issue the directive at any time.
Right, right. No, I'm just saying to have another board that can, I'm not sure where that creates the balance. But, like I said, there's no doubt work has been done. It's just a question of, I think, again, structurally, thinking about it going forward. And I do think this is the first discussion point on a bigger discussion that the DOR has motivated. But, you know, and I think, you know, it's going to be an interesting discussion next Monday. Because I think a lot of good points are made, and I appreciate that. I think it was a very balanced discussion where good points are made on all sides, and I think that's important, especially, you know, because the voters who ultimately will decide this are the ones listening. So it's good for them to be able to hear this. It's like a fireside chat, a casual conversation, versus a very formal. Any other questions or comments before I? Can I get a motion to adjourn? Since we are now in official meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you,
all
everybody.
for taking
Thank
the
you
time.
very much.
See, it was such a fireside chat.